I have a wonderful guest with me today, Akissi Stokes, the founder of Wundergrubs. And I tell you, when I met you first at the Lithonia Farmers Market, I saw your sign from across the market, and I saw just the word grubs. And my brother and I, when we were younger, we thought of ourselves as cowboys, and we would always say, "Let's go get some grub." Let's
Yes.
go to grandma's house and get some grub. So immediately, that's what I thought of. I was like, "Wow, she must cook like my grandma." I'm gonna go get some grub and really enjoy myself at your booth. Little did I know that
Yes.
when I got to your booth, we would find some wonderful treats that speak to sustainability, that speak to saving the environment, and providing a whole new source of protein that few people think of when they think about making cookies. So, before we dive into that, tell us a little bit about you. Give us your background, and then tell us what led you to launch Wonder Grubs.
So I grew up in a small southern town named Thomasville, Georgia, just way, 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 way down south. It's right on top of Florida, and actually grew up on a farm with my grandfather. He was a sharecropper who eventually did come to own his own acres. So he did actually get his 40 acres and a mule. And so he built his own home. So he was probably the earliest model of entrepreneurship for me. And so we definitely lived from farm to table. So I was definitely clear on that. From there, went to Emory and stayed in Atlanta after graduating from Emory. And I've always kind of dabbled in entrepreneurship. My dad owns his own company, a small business systems company. So I've always watched people kind of create their own destiny, if you will. But I've always been interested in food. So I've always been interested in cooking. My mother and father were very much hippies, so we were eating tofu before it was cool. um, my mother was always into herbs, so we didn't do a lot of medicine, and she was always into how food healing you, and very big on how you utilize water and things of that nature. So the partner that I have now that I met, he went to Emory as well, and he is from New York by way of St. Thomas. So he's very big into water conservation. So I met my soulmate, if you will, very big into water conservation, aquaponics, and things of that nature. And we were watching a show by Anthony Bourdain, and he was in Haiti. And he tried to do a noble thing of like feeding people. And this was after the earthquakes that happened there. And kind of chaos broke out. And he was like, he was sad he didn't have the foresight to kind of see how people who've been hungry for a couple of days, how it might impact them, and he was like stupid American kind of thing. And I started thinking, wait a minute, through my travels and my boyfriend's travels, we've been to a lot of places where people either don't have access to water or access to clean water. And I worked for the Carter Center for a number of years. And so that gave me some additional insight into just what type of environmental issues people face. And when you talk about food security, things that we take for granted, we're selling bottled water for God's sake, but some people drink from the same water that animals clean themselves in. And so when you talk about disease, when you talk about rain collection, when you talk about land crisis, people fighting over land, so you don't even have land to build food on, to grow food on, I started thinking of ways that people could grow something with just a couple of simple natural resources. So I started looking at insects. And there are two professors, two scientists in Germany who in particular were using mealworms for a number of things. I know there's a couple of companies here in the States that use crickets, and crickets are the craze. But when we started looking at crickets initially, they use a lot of water, actually. They do take a lot of water, a lot of space to grow. They're quite noisy, and crickets are quite smelly as well. So we were like, okay,
Yeah.
we don't want to head down that road. My boyfriend was like, no, you cannot grow those in the house. So when I
Right.
started looking at mealworms, they're almost completely sustainable animals. So their castings, as they're going through their growth stage and maturation, you can use it as fertilizer in your garden. You can use them to compost waste. They actually eat through newspaper. They eat through plastic, low-grade plastic resins. So they're actually looking at them to kind of eliminate or help with landfills. Um, and then you can also eat them. And so when I started looking at what it took to grow them, they proliferate in places that are very hot, which is where most places have drought issues and land issues. They also don't require any direct water to grow or eat. They actually burrow, so they don't require a lot of sun. They actually shy away from light, so they burrow. And you can have the space of a closet to grow the equivalency of a couple of cows in terms of how much space you need. So when I started looking at them, I was like, oh, these things are incredible. And when you roast them down, about 50, they go from 30% live to about 50% roasted. Their weight in protein, and the rest are good fats and fiber and other nutrients. So I started trying to think of a way to introduce them into the United States market, in the Southeast in particular. A lot of competitors are just not in the Southeast because, if it moves, we fry it and dye it. And so we eat it. If it moves, we eat it. So I was like, hey, a cookie, desserts. People like desserts. They're not intimidating. They're friendly. And I started experimenting with recipes. My boyfriend and I, my partner and I, of how can we make it taste good and it also be healthy for you? So we also took the sugar out. So we use a natural sweetener now. So it's zero sugar. We took the soy out. We also took the dairy out. We don't even use almond milk or rice milk even. So we took the nut out as well. And we use like a chickpea as a binder. So we finally got the taste down. And so that's kind of my background and how I kind of got into this, trying to find ways that were affordable for people to eat. And also eventually becoming a farmer myself and to start harvesting the worms myself and showing other people how to do it, and making a business out of that, kind of extending the business. So even if you don't eat them, you could become a farmer of them.
Wow, that blows my mind because you just essentially told me in the space of a closet, I could have the equivalent of a cow,
Yes.
and and then produce protein that appears to have a much more positive impact on the environment than having a cow because
Yeah.
of all of the methane output when dealing with bovine
Yes.
versus these worms.
And kind of
So
in keeping with that, Mark, they don't emit any methane at all. That's
wow,
another plus. So no methane gas, no emissions, not even a percentage of 1%, zero.
this sounds like superfood. Why is this the best kept secret in America?
Just after continuously doing my own research, conducting my own research, the US is, in terms of other countries or continents, is a baby. We're infants. So when you talk about Asian countries or African countries or South American countries who have been around for thousands of years, insects have been a large part of the cuisine and are a normal part of the cuisine. So again, in our travels, we found, a lot of this is even street fare. You can get a mealworm taco, in Mexico and South America, in Brazil in particular, places like that. So cooking, or a friend of mine, she actually consults in Brussels, and she's like, oh, in the corner store down the street from my loft, now they sell salads with crickets on the top, so it's not a foreign concept. Here, it's never something that's been, readily introduced, and there's an ick factor. And we see bugs, you associate them with negativity. We pesticide them to death. We kill them, when they're in our house, they're an inconvenience. So we've never really looked at them as a food source. And it's also looked at as something being associated with people who are quote unquote poor or destitute, versus nutritional or healthy, and lessening, the carbon footprint
Right,
on our earth.
right. And that carbon footprint, as you mentioned, this sounds like it has the possibility of really igniting urban farming with the
Definitely.
space requirements that you just laid out. Is that something that you're seeing in your the extension of your business and teaching people how to grow these insects. Is that what you're starting to see, that there's an opportunity that if
Yes.
even people aren't eating them, they
Yes.
can turn this into a side hustle?
Cor- Correct, precisely. So that's the long-term plan that we have. I've started to get a little buzz in Atlanta. So we've been in the Atlanta Business Chronicle. We were featured, and we've got another feature coming up. But that is definitely where we want to head, of going into an area, a blighted area, or area that is economically challenged, and saying, okay, hey, let's take a small dilapidated building and let's turn this into something. So he and I kind of combining our ideas of him taking the aquaponics and how we use that to grow, with water, the food that's needed, to kind of, to using that to kind of farm with, and then taking the waste from that and using that to feed those worms, so that we have a completely recyclable building, a way of growing food. So when you talk about the urban farming, bringing some kids in from local schools, having some interns from some colleges around the area, and showing them how to create their own supply, their own, how to become a part of the supply food chain. And that's one of the things. I lived in DC for a couple of years, and I definitely saw food deserts, and they're real, and I'm starting to see them here. And so, how can you create your own food source, not always being a consumer, but being a supplier? And that's where I don't see a lot of us today and a lot of kids today. How do you become a part of it? Not always consuming something, and not always selling something from a retail standpoint, but becoming a wholesaler. What does that look like? What does that mean?
Hmm.
So this is definitely something that could do that, and something that could be international, worldwide. It doesn't have to be limited to a domestic market.
Right.
There are definitely people who are looking for this product, who use it in large volumes overseas. So how do you become a part of that supply food chain?
Who are some of those countries that this would be a major part of their food staple, that this could end up being an export crop for, these future urban farmers that we're talking about?
There are a lot of things that are happening in places like Amsterdam, Scandinavian countries in particular. The type of things that they're doing are phenomenal. Like, they're light years ahead of us, just even in the policy making. Um, Places like Singapore, China, South America, Brazil, places like Venezuela. They're about 80% of the world eats insects in some form or fashion. It may not particularly be mealworms, but other types of insects. There are a couple of companies like Hot Licks and some others that I've followed for a while, who've been supplying for a while. There's actually a guy out of, I think he's originally from Pakistan, who went to UGA, the World of Ephemophagy, and he started his company. He's kind of ahead of the curve, and he started out with products, and now he's doing supply. So he's supplying some
Wow.
restaurants in New York, who started actually serving up insects, and trying to make it a part of everyday cuisine. So there are Ghana, Kenya, Lagos, Nigeria, friends who from there who say, oh, yeah, we eat this at street fair all the time. It's not a big deal. So places like that. So I think in 5 or 10 years, just like with sushi, when I think about sushi 20 years ago, the thought of eating it was very foreign for Americans. And now you have sushi bars and sushi
You're right.
restaurants and
You're
sushi
absolutely
in
right.
grocery stores. So
Right, right.
I think in 15, 20 years, or even sooner, the landscape for this type of food product will look very different.
Let's drill down into that. Now, your tip of the spear right now are cookies.
Mhm.
How has that been received? Are you seeing some of the traditional channels? Are the places where you're winning most are your boutique shops that are looking for this type of unique cuisine?
So I definitely, I went through a program, an accelerator program here locally, hosted by Emory, called Start Me. And they're all about social entrepreneurship, which is what I'm focused on. So there definitely were a couple of people who were like, oh, you could do this as a boutique. And I'm like, that's not where my passion lies. That's not the intent of my business.
Hmm.
The intent of my business is to feed people, um, and is to be an affordable food source. and something that's also healthy and tastes good for them. That's also nutritional. So I could charge a lot more for the product. There definitely was a response from different places, but that's not where I want to go. I want to go after, I want to be accessible to the everyday man, if you will, man or woman, everyday consumer. So there's certain things you see as staples. I would like this to become a part of that staple that you buy, that you put in your refrigerator or freezer, not something that's you can only exclusively buy at certain type of boutique stores for an astronomical price. So that's not where we want to go with this business. And in terms of the supply, I've actually started to see a couple of products on the market like spaghetti sauces and meatballs, things like that, just kind of an everyday food. So, and actually the response has been great in Atlanta. We found that our market is like women who are from 25 to 45 years old, who are concerned about health and are concerned about fitness, but they're not fanatics about it. They're not your CrossFitters, people like that. And those people like the product as well, because it does give them an alternative sense of protein without all of the fat, and without all of the sugar. And it actually tastes good.
Mm-hmm,
So
it does.
I used to bodybuild and I didn't care about taste before. I just wanted the protein. I want to get a certain a reaction from my body, a certain look. So if it tastes good, that's even better. So actually the response has been great. We went to Essence Fest earlier this year.
Okay.
So we got in.
Okay.
And we told them what was going to be in the product. And the response was phenomenal. So it helped us.
So are you given what you just laid out as that target market, and I can completely see people who want that protein as a source of energy, almost clean, healthy energy.
Yes.
for working out. I could almost see this as a compliment to that whole Gatorade crowd.
Yes.
The people who consume those types of products that are on, the extreme of high performance sports, really being the ones that pull this into the marketplace.
Yes.
And if you think about the marketing strategy that Gatorade had early on, when it first launched, most of America looked at it in the same way they looked at sushi. They were like,
yeah,
because the taste wasn't great when they first launched it.
Yeah.
But they looked at the Florida Gators and they said, those guys are performing, maybe we should be drinking it too. Is that how you're thinking about marketing even your cookies to that crowd as a performance food?
Yes.
And then hoping that they pull you into kind of a broader mass market?
That's the hope. I tried to do it the opposite way, and that's not working as well.
Right.
So, and I have a small team that I work with out of Emory, and they were like, performance. Let's go with performance first. And they're absolutely right. And so that's what I'm finding out. I have a couple of customers who are regulars, and these are definitely women who work out. I'm getting ready to poll them with a couple of Zumba crowds. So so that is our goal now for the next 6 months, is to focus on the everyday woman who works out, and also man. So anyone who's doing Zumba, someone who's a cyclist, someone who's a runner. And again, these aren't people who necessarily are highly competitive, but just kind of looking for everyday fitness. And like you said, looking for some energy, looking for something that's low in calories, high in energy, high in kickback. And that's also affordable and also tastes pretty good.
That's the first thing that came to my mind. The long distance runners, the Kenyans that keep winning all of the races here in the U.S. If you could get one of those guys across the finish line with one of your cookies,
that would be awesome.
Right?
That would be awesome.
I mean, but also just playing with that a little bit more. If that market, Kenya and Nigeria and Ghana, if they're already consuming,
yes,
this type of affair, wouldn't they?
I'm sorry, Mark, I didn't hear you.
Okay, can you see me now?
I can see you now. We're back.
I don't know what happened. The hackers were trying to.
Oh, wow.
So they brought it down and had told me to reload. Wow.
Wow.
So I
onto something.
If they want to know this information, they don't have to. I know it's some valuable stuff. So I just said, given Kenya, Ghana, and these other markets already are, consuming these sorts of worms. Why not launch internationally first?
I just hadn't thought about it. Things went much faster than I anticipated. So I hadn't considered it. And it's funny you mentioned that the last meeting I had with the team that's helping me, and it was a small team who actually gave me a microloan, awarded me with a microloan. That was one of the things we talked about. One of them actually has a connect with some cyclists here who are connected with some international cyclists. And he was like, have you ever, and he's actually originally from China. And he was like, you hadn't thought about that? And I was like, no, I hadn't. So maybe something I look into and explore. And when I think about it, I have a lot of international friends who travel, and it just never entered my mind. I probably thought I don't have the audacity to do that, but why not?
Yeah, I would think that would be an easier path, because the mentality is already there to consume these sorts of items. And then if you're bringing something innovative into the market that's not currently offered, using that ingredient, has a probability of catching on.
All right, I have to give you 10% if that works out, Mark.
Hey, well, we're not just going to talk about it. We're going to get together and drill down on this a little bit more, because I'm fascinated by this. And my grandfather was a farmer and had tons of cows, and then the land is still in the family, a few hundred acres of land. I'd love to one up him and grow some worms, and then tell him, hey,
I'm ready. I would love
exactly. You think you did something with those cows? Look at these worms.
Watch this. He would be
10 times the protein. Right. Exactly. So yeah, this is very, very fascinating because of all of the sustainable benefits. When you look at it from every dimension, you're absolutely right. This is the future of farming. And if people can get over like the ick factor, this could be a core ingredient that really provides a lot of protein to middle and low income families.
Yes.
Across the world. So,
and Georgia could be one of the first to do it. That was kind of my sell. I had a really hard time getting the permit for this business.
Talk us through that. What was that process like?
Normally it takes about 2 to 3 weeks, and it took me about 6 to 7 months. So when I first submitted my application, and the woman who eventually approved me shall remain nameless, but I'm forever in her debt. When I first approached her with the idea, when she brought me in, at first she denied my application, and I asked why. And she said, well, you don't have a shared kitchen that you're going to cook your product out of. And no one would touch me. So it's kind of like, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? So anytime I would go to a shared kitchen to say, hey, can I put you down on my application? They were like, well, are you permanent first? And I'm like, well, I can't get the permit unless I have a shared kitchen listed. So I actually went to a shared kitchen here in Decatur. And it took her 2 years to get her shared kitchen. She changed the game of being able to do it. So I thought, okay, here's a woman who was innovative. Maybe she'll appreciate that about me. So I went and I waited for her GM for about 2 hours, unannounced, no appointment. And she finally came out and met me. And I said, hey, I can't get this permit unless I could put down a shared kitchen. Can I use your shared kitchen? And she and I literally sat down for over the course of a couple of days and kind of mapped out how I needed to bring this product in, what it needed to look like, how I needed to cook in the kitchen, what guidelines I needed to follow. And I took that information back to the Georgia Department of Agriculture and said, hey, I met with the woman that you said, the GM, and she said she'd let me in provided I do these steps. And she said, okay. And she still kind of gave me a bit of a hard time. Another month went by, my application still wasn't approved. And I said, well, what's the problem? And she said, honestly, we've just never done this before. No one has ever come to us to use insects in a food product. So I did my own research. I brought some books back to her, some links, some sites, some information. So I informed her as much as she informed me. And I said, by the time we're finished with this process, you and I are going to be really great friends. And we were. So by the end of 6 months, I was in her office and she was showing me what exactly I need to do to put on my labels. And so I did everything she asked me to do. And I finally got approved and got a permit. So we're actually the first in Georgia to receive a permit for insects in a food product.
Wow.
And to sell it.
Now, I got a chance to talk to the people at the Shared Kitchen that you launched with.
Yes.
They were on the podcast.
Yes, awesome.
Yeah, they got a chance to, and you're absolutely right. Both you guys are just serious boss mavericks. Because you wouldn't take no. You went down to the state. I said, no, I'm getting a permit, and we're gonna sit here till we figure this thing out. And sometimes in business, that's exactly what you have to do. If you're going to break ground, first thing you got to do is dig those heels in and map out a course. And it sounded like both you guys, the team over at Shared Kitchens LLC, and then you following in trying to get a permit. And so they weren't going to touch it until you mapped out the course for them.
Yeah.
Otherwise, on the first part, if you didn't get a shared kitchen, you were left with trying to finance all of that stuff on the front end, which would have been the death knell of your business.
Yeah.
Because that's cost prohibitive. So that shared kitchen piece was another aspect of launch that I try to stress to a lot of entrepreneurs. Find a way to push that capital investment off until you have a proven business concept and you've hit the tipping point where bringing it in-house makes sense. Yeah. And it sounds like you went through that kind of same sort of rationalization.
Yes, definitely. Definitely.
So after you get the permit and you're starting to make the cookies, what recipes came to mind? I know you have 3 or 4 different types that I've tried, at least. Yeah. So what went through your mind as you started to then develop a product or a cookie? What were you targeting and thinking about as you move from permit into product stage?
Things that are seasonal. So in trying to keep with our sustainability approach, using fruits or vegetables that are available during this particular season. That was number 1. Number 2 was the grubs actually naturally have a nutty type taste. So then trying to figure out what complements that. So we landed on, and actually polling it with people too. What do you like? So chocolate chip, chocolate and nuts go well together. The oatmeal cranberry raisin, that goes well with nuts. And things that are kind of hearty. And so when you're talking about someone who is a cyclist or someone who's a runner, the protein isn't just the only thing I'm looking for. What other type of things can I put in there that are going to create chemical reactions in your body? They're going to give you the punch that you want, lysosine or something that our bodies don't naturally produce, but need to make that muscle grow back stronger. So what other foods do that? What other spices do that? So we looked at that as well. So at talking to people who are bodybuilders, and so what type of things they're supplementing with, could I put that into the cookie as well? So that's what we looked at when we were doing the recipe. So it was a whole food once we finished making the whole product. And also cutting that sugar out. We actually have a vegan line as well. Some people don't want the grub, but they like the fact that it didn't have anything else, any other allergens in it. So we started kind of leveraging that market as well, saying, okay, we have a vegan option as well. For those who are truly vegan, who don't want any type of animal byproduct, we have something for you also with the same health benefit.
Like that. So tell us the types of cookies you have. There's a chocolate chip, it sounds like.
Yep, chocolate chip. There's an oatmeal cran. There's an oatmeal raisin and also an oatmeal cranberry pecan cookie. We also do pecan praline. We were at Decatur Books Festival early this year, and we introduced a lemon lavender cookie, which actually was very, very popular. And we actually use true organic dried lavender flowers in it. And then we're looking at now a cranberry orange cookie that we want to introduce. So we're kind of testing that out right now. And I think and peanut butter. Peanut butter, we stopped using the peanut butter. It was a little cost prohibitive, and we just didn't have as large a response to the peanut butter as we had hoped or initially thought. So that one we've discontinued for now. And those are the ones we have so far. But we also have some other food products waiting in the wings.
Okay.
That we introduced during the accelerator program, but I haven't put on the site yet. So a bug sushi, a version of sushi with bugs, actually a version of dumplings with a bug sauce. In addition, we have a stir fry mix.
Okay.
And we have something called arancini balls, which are like rice balls. It's Sicilian street food. And a couple other things we're looking to introduce. So we have an event we're going to try to have in February to just have a tasting so people can come out and check these other food products out and give us their feedback.
Okay. Well, as you were laying out your ingredients, a few things kind of popped to my mind. How far off is a cookie from a bar?
That's funny. So initially we looked at doing a bar. Okay. And there are 1,001 bars on the shelves.
But there are none with insects in them.
None with insects, but we thought that's a pretty established market. It's a really tough market at this point to get into. And although I think we're talking to a couple of stores now, they want to place us on the shelf with bars, but we are technically considered a cookie. But because of the grub and the health benefits, will be amongst the bars, and the fact that we are a dessert, if you will, but a healthy one, an energy or healthy dessert, kind of sets us apart. So we didn't want to just become lumped in with another bar.
Okay. So you don't think the grub aspect of being a clean protein with less sugar, with more punch, would make it differentiated as a power bar in that market?
Not enough, in the sense that, again, we're still dealing with the American psychology of what my food looks like and tastes like. So the mere fact that we mention grub, and sometimes when we say the word grub or mealworm, it doesn't readily register, which has been interesting. But the fact that it's an insect, once that registers with people, it being a cookie seems to go over a bit better, is a bit more palatable for people.
Okay. Because I mean, my mind is completely thinking about international market. You know, this sort of thing, you know, follows the pattern of a product that wins abroad and then is imported back in, you know, after you've established a base among people who already eat it every day.
Yeah.
As a product ingredient, it sounds like you're positioning it almost like a pasta with that sort of a kind of, you know, nutty texture feel.
Yeah.
Is that the only area where it could work? Because the other place my mind went was a morning cereal.
Yes.
Okay. Because
so we've thought about powders. We've actually thought about seasoning sprinkles.
Exactly.
On popcorn and things of that nature. So there's a whole host of things.
If it has a nutty taste, it'd make a great creamer in coffee.
Yes.
And so those sorts of things seem like, again, product areas that might be easier for people to deal with. If they could mix it in another, with another ingredient that they already consume for their workouts or as part of their daily, you know, regimen. Because a lot of people would have never thought to be using almond milk in coffee.
That's very true.
Coconut milk 20 years ago.
Very true.
It would have completely turned people off. Today, Starbucks is selling the almond milk lattes. So
yes.
So that sort of thing seemed to pop to mind as another one of those potential entry point product ideas. But this is the kind of thing that in my discussions with entrepreneurs, I love to not only see but participate in, because it's how David beats Goliath.
Yes.
You have to continue to be disruptive.
Yes.
Finding and looking for not only new technologies, new processes, and new products, if you're going to keep that market advantage. Because right now you have it. The big
Yeah.
guys aren't playing with grubs.
No.
They
No.
haven't figured out the process. They haven't figured out the market. And you have that lead. And as many new products as you can figure out in your own lab,
Yes.
that's work that differentiates you and helps you establish a brand of trust in the market before they get in.
I think the biggest thing with doing some of the other products, and that's where that farming license come in. Um, and we got caught in kind of a gray area. So I have to bring the grubs in. And there's no one locally. Grubly Farms, one of the co-founders has been extremely supportive and helpful, throughout this process. And so they use mealworms, but they use worms or larvae of the black soldier fly, and we use a darkling beetle. And one of the limitations, restrictions is that although they produce grubs, they have to be food grade and they have to be in a food grade facility, which has to be completely separate than a facility you're using for livestock. So what we're having to do is ship in the grubs that we're using out of an organic facility in California who actually supply Fear Factor, and they want to supply the Fear Factor. So they've just gotten certified for food grade worms that can be used for human consumption. So that's where that farming license comes in, where I want to get that farming license because they're treating the grubs like a cow or a pig or a sheep or anything else. So I'd have to have a facility, but I'd have to have that farming license first to be able to grow them and sell them wholesale. So that would allow me to grow enough in volume to use them for these other products without incurring the shipping cost, the transportation costs and everything and the overhead from another supplier. So that's kind of where we are right now.
Right. Perfect. That's perfect. That, you're thinking about your value chain and, moving into the next pieces of the business that are going to make this a long-term viable enterprise. Because without that, you're right, you're going to lose a tremendous amount of value as you ramp up if you have to continuously ship your core ingredient from the West Coast. Even though this sounds like it's a product, unlike a cow, that it has to be, brought into the slaughterhouse, and the energy to move them from point A to point B to get it to the grocery store or the wholesaler is tremendous compared to the grub. It's still a significant cost for you.
Yeah. And I want to keep the cost down for the consumer as well. Because I could buy enough, from this particular supplier, but it would impact when we kind of crunch the numbers, it would kind of drive the price up of the product. And I want to keep it at a certain range.
Storage, how when you buy a shipment of grubs, is that have a shelf life of 7 days, 14 days, or what's the shelf life of a grub once it's been delivered to you?
So once they've been delivered, there are a couple of different ways you can store them. So freezing them, we can freeze them for about 3 to 4 months before we put them into use. Live, once we actually process them, so if we roast them, interesting enough, we can keep them unrefrigerated once they're roasted for up to a year. And I've tested it.
Without impacting the quality of the product at all.
At all.
Wow.
The great thing about grubs as well, you keep them in some type of substrate, such as an oat bran or oatmeal, outside of the waste that you may be feeding them, but they don't have bacteria, so they don't readily themselves carry any type of bacteria. The only thing that could carry bacteria would be the substrate. So there's no spoiling point, if you will, for the worms. Some may die off, and you kind of clean those out. But in terms of like having an outbreak, that has yet to be found yet. Once they're cooked, if we boil them, in that state, we can keep them refrigerated for about up to a month, and they're safe to use. So their shelf life.
We just found the future. This is the future. We're talking about the future. The future of food. You are going to be that lady with the picture on the side of the bag, everything out there on the shelf. That we're talking about the future of all food now. That's incredible. If you're saying roasted a year on the shelf,
Yeah.
unrefrigerated. Think about
Unrefrigerated.
all the food deserts around the world that if they had access just to what you described, you've changed the nutritional balance overnight.
Yes. And that's the goal. That's at the heart of what we want to do. Um, Aside from profit, money, anything else, that when you talk about food security, that is what food security looks like for me, for people, for humans.
Well, I think you, in addition to laying out just the operational strategy, it's going to be more apparent as you get the business scaling that you're going to need a legal and political strategy. You're going
Yes.
to need the equivalent of the Cattlemen's Association
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
help make sure that there's the potential legal opposition and regulatory opposition,
Hmm.
because this is going to be a protein that's going to compete directly with cows
Yeah. And
and
it's
other
starting
major
already.
right.
And it's starting. There's a group called Tiny Farms that kind of function as a platform or a forum, a cohort for people to kind of come to who are looking to use insects for food, and they give you advice. There are companies like Exo and Chipotle. So Exo probably is the front runner on getting VC. Um, on I think Nas actually put in, I don't remember the exact number, a couple 100,000 into their business earlier this year. Tim Ferriss is on board with these guys. So they're trailblazers. Chipotle, I think, won Shark Tank, Bitty Foods out of California, and all of these guys are using crickets. But I think they've gotten a forum started where they're trying to start looking at regulation, because there really is no regulation specifically around insects. So they just use the traditional livestock guidelines for you. So these guys, I think, have started getting together to look at policymaking. But one of the other kind of barriers to entry that I found is being Black and female.
Okay.
Kind of
Talk
creates his
talk me
own
through
kind of.
that. What's the barrier you're running into?
Um, you just don't have the same, like, there are not a lot of women in this type of business. When you talk about food business, and when you look at the commissioners, when you look at the boards of some of the livestock regulatory, we're not there
Mhm.
as greenlighters. We're there as coordinators and support staff, but we're not greenlighting a lot of things. And we talk about the innovative market, this emerging market, it kind of looks the same.
Mm.
Um, there are a couple of people, like I said, with Grubbly Farms, like that co-founder, he's been phenomenal and has introduced me to a couple of people, but they haven't called me back.
Mm.
And aside from me just being a small player, or non-existent probably for them at all, I've just found that I don't see a lot of people who look like me, just in that supply chain period. So it being an emerging market just makes it a little bit more challenging, like really trying to get some credibility and accessibility to what's happening in the market. So
Mm.
I'm having to find kind of be a bit more innovative than some others might have to be.
Hmm. If you had a magic wand, what are the three things that you would fiat into place that would make life easier for you as an entrepreneur in this space?
One thing that actually the team that I work with approached me about was, and what was the only thing that was probably lacking in the accelerator program I was in. When you talk about food, it's very different from any other type of business someone else is doing because it is regulated to death.
Hmm.
Um, would be just a very quick and dirty how-to guide. There's just a lot of things that people take for granted, that it took me a long time to figure out and work through. Liability insurance, how to acquire that for this type of business. Permitting, what are the steps what do you have to have in place before you even go knock on the door to try to get permitting from the Georgia Department of Agriculture? So a kind of little small how-to guide on how to do business in your state and in your county. The second thing would be a really, a really good mentor. Um, so I had really good mentors out of the accelerator program, but again, when you're talking about food, you need someone who specifically knows that business. Um, and the third thing, I would probably say time. Working full time and trying to get this type of business off the ground has been challenging just because of the time commitment I have to make to it, of just little small things you need to get done. So probably just an assistant. It'd be really great to have just a really a full-time assistant to help me work on all those things that pop into my head, or kind of doing some of that legwork that I can't do when I'm at work for 8 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And I can completely sympathize with that. I know when I talk with entrepreneurs, I do encourage them to soft launch like you're doing. Have a full-time job, because you do need to pay the bills. You got to have benefits. You got to have
Yeah.
a retirement that is secure. But in the free time, where there is free time, use that as the opportunity to soft launch the business, learn what you need to know about your core market, really develop the business model, and where you see traction, that gives you the opportunity to start making decisions
Yeah.
on where to pull from that full-time job into your enterprise. But that struggle is not an easy one to balance,
Yeah.
because as you get traction, you're right, there are always new questions that need to be answered. And entrepreneurs are mavericks. They're typically bumping into places where people have never asked those questions before. Like you trying to get a permit for insects. No one had ever knocked on the door and said, I'm doing this. So
Yeah.
it took some sitting down in rooms with people and scratching your head and doing stuff on the back of a napkin before you could kind of get a framework to how to move forward. And, you know, quite frankly, that's a barrier to entry to a lot of people who want to come in your space. If they don't put that time in, they aren't going to get where you are.
Yeah.
You're going to chop down a lot of the weeds for them.
Yeah.
But for those who are not willing to put that time in, it does serve as a barrier to entry. Looking out 5 or 10 years into your business, um, have you nailed down your strategy to a point where you see how your business is going to unfold? Are you going to be a cookie company? Are you going to be a products company like P&G? Are you going to be a fully horizontal player that produces and products as well as grows the ingredient and sells to other players? How do you see your business model playing out?
Probably the latter, where we're selling food products, but we're also a supplier. Um, I want to say, like, ever since the ninth grade, I'll never forget Dr. Quigley is his name, an econ professor. And that's what I got my degree in. And he introduced me to economics. And we had this exercise in class, this project. And he said, I want you guys to go back and build a model, an economic model on what type of business, what do you want to be? What do you want to do from an enterprise standpoint? And after a couple of weeks, I came back and everyone was presenting out, and I did my presentation. And he said, "Okay, Akissi, what do you want to be?" And I said, "I want to own a quarry." And he said, "What?" I said, "Yeah." I said, I thought about it, and I said, "I want to own a quarry." And he was like, "Why in the world would you want to own a quarry?" And other people were like, "Oh, I want to be a stockbroker," things like that, a CEO. And I was like, "No." I was like, I want to be the guy who supplies the guy who supplies the guy who supplies the guy.
Okay. Not because you just want to throw rocks at people. You want to be
Yeah. I was like, I want to be the guy who owns the natural resource.
Sure.
So I want to have the quarry. And so regardless of what type of product you produce, you get your materials from me, from my quarry. That's who I want to be. So with the Millworm business, at the end of the day, in 5 and 10 years, we may have products, we may have events where people come and you taste and you see different type of food products that are being produced. But ultimately, I'd like probably 60 to 70% of that company to be, we're actually supplying the powder. But also we're growing and harvesting the worms and finding new and working with scientists on new and inventive ways to use them. So everything from food to handling waste in all forms, be it landfills or taking care of the compost at our gardens, or taking care of the waste from other farmers markets that are being used as food for our, our supply, our feed. So yeah, that's ultimately where I would like us to be in 5-10 years.
That vision excites me. I mean, that's a complete circular loop system. And this superfood, these worms are, incredible in that sense that they not only provide this clean protein, but can consume, products that are in landfills that make this whole circle of life a reality for many people around the world at a price point that is market changing. So that's exciting that that's your vision. And I tell you, when you achieve that, it is going to be destabilizing for some, but empowering for many. And that's what Gorillapreneurs do, and that's what Mavericks do. And that's why I couldn't wait to have this conversation. I know when we talked the first time at the market and I tasted your cookies, I was like, wow, that's innovative. But then as I started to look into some of the things that you relayed to me, I could not believe the power of these worms and what they could mean to the environment, what they could mean to food, what they could mean to just health, all the way around. That there's it's the best kept secret from Americans that I can think of at this point.
Yeah.
So tell us today where you are. How do we get our hands on some of these great oatmeal cranberry cookies? Because that's the one I tried, that one, and I tried the chocolate chip. How do we get our hands on some of those cookies today? How can we support your business? And then when are you going to be somewhere where people can come and meet you? Because I'm sure when they see this broadcast and they hear the things that you're trying to do, there are going to be some people out there who want to be farmers like I do. And there are going to be some people who want to try to push this mission forward to see the globalization of your business in places where people already consume these worms.
Well, we have an online presence, so we're at www.wundr. That's WUNDER grubs.com, one word. We also are going to get back into Essence Fest. Fingers crossed for 2018. We do a lot of different festivals throughout the year. As you mentioned earlier, we're at Lithonia Farmers Market during the summer. But what we're going to try to do, and we realize that most of our business is not going to be pushed online. So we find that because of the newness of it, and the educational piece of it, people definitely feel more comfortable buying it, in person. So we're going to start having some events starting in 2018. We're going to be inviting people out, and we'll have it posted on our site as well. And we're going to try to do it in some areas around Atlanta, East Atlanta, and downtown, where people can come out, buy the product, but also do a tasting, as I mentioned, of the product. And we're trying to get into a couple of stores locally. So we're trying to get into Sprouts, Rainbow, and the vegan product, we're trying to get into Savananda. So hopefully you'll see us locally in those places. There's been some interest from a couple of people from Whole Foods, but I'm imagining that'll be a much longer process. Okay. And we're also going to try to start putting our product at local fitness centers. So like there's some personal trainers who said they'll position the product at their fitness center. So we'll put that information on the site as soon as we have specific locations.
Okay. Have you thought about going direct?
Yeah, we'll definitely do direct.
Like doing some outbound mailers to people.
Yeah.
Try to entice them to get to your website. Because I would imagine there are 3 or 4 different segments. I don't know. Just based on what you described, there's some people out there. There's a gentleman last night that asked me this question. I was doing an interview with some entrepreneurs and an ex-football player. This guy's huge. And he's like, since I stopped playing football, I've gotten diabetes. Wow. I've gotten high blood pressure. Wow. He said, but I love eating cookies. What do you think? Where can I get some? Right, exactly. That's what I said. I said, I'm talking to somebody tomorrow that got what you need. And, because I love munching on cookies while I'm working as well. I said, let me talk to her, and I'm going to get her to send you her email, and you try these out. Don't ask what's in them, just eat them. And then when you find out you like them, we'll tell you.
Well, you must have been talking to my silent partner, because that was last night. He was like, you need to just send out samples. Just start sending them out. Just So that was our talk last night. Just send them
Well,
out.
I think we take it one more level, and
Okay.
we can get a list of people who have high blood pressure, diabetes. We can get
Yes.
people who are all kind of health concerns. You can put together a health box that says, hey, if you want
Yeah, I like that.
something, almost like Fresh Direct and all these other guys who ship
Yeah.
food direct to your house. There's I think a segment out there, certainly around the holidays, that would want um, the Wundergrubs cookies because they can consume them and they won't have the
Yeah.
deadly impacts that some of the other
No.
sugar-based products have.
Yeah.
So, no, I think there are a lot of different channels that you can, until this market emerges as a cohesive market that can be mainstreamed.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of micro channels that can be tapped into and get in front of those right folks.
And
But
now your 10% is going up to 20%, Mark.
well, we're gonna get together because I got a pair of overhauls that are underutilized, and I'm gonna be Farmer Brown, except for Wundergrub Browns. I'm gonna be out there with some worms, everything. Grandfather's gonna be like, I can't believe it. Exactly. Because he has this image of me when I was 3 or 4 years old, riding on the back of a cow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because I was afraid of the horse. So cow seemed a little.
I'm like, the cow was, little did you know, the cow could have been worse.
I know, it could have been worse. I'm sitting there. But I no, this has been terrific, and the information that you've given to us here today has been phenomenal. Before I let you go, are there 2 or 3 things you can tell to our entrepreneurs who follow the podcast about ways that you got your brand out there, or some other piece of advice that you would say? Because being an entrepreneur is not easy. So give us 2 or 3 pieces of advice or words of encouragement to keep us fighting.
One is you definitely need to know your product. One of the selling points for me has been in even getting people just to sample the product was because I was so educated and passionate about it. And being able to give that, that quick 15-minute pitch, our 5-minute pitch, reworking the plan, so you may start out one way in your business plan, and you have this beautiful marketing plan and financial plan and modeling and et cetera. But you're going to have to constantly adapt it and be okay with that. And when you talked about the soft launch, just knowing it's not going to necessarily happen overnight. You just got to keep working at it, stay passionate about it, and not give up. And so that would probably be the first. And secondly, would be the finance piece. It needs to make sense. And so keeping an account on your taxes, how you spend your money, where you're spending your money. And again, kind of going back and revisiting that model over and over again and making sure that it is making sense. And I would suggest doing that soft launch and not just jumping out there and going in. There's going to be so much you can learn, and just sharing your product with people. That was probably the biggest thing from Start Me. I used to keep everything close to the chest, and it was a secret. No, share, not saying share this, the recipe, the secret to your recipe, but sharing about your business and what you're trying to do and where you're trying to go, and doing podcasts and things like this. And it was amazing how the universe will open up in the context that you'll make and the people that you'll meet.
You're right. I had to learn that lesson too, that I quickly found out that when God sprinkles ideas, it's like, a soft mist, and it lands on everybody. And there are a lot of people who have very similar concepts or ideas, and some of them are inspired to move forward with them and others aren't. Sharing your ideas is your opportunity to put that candle in a dark room and attract those who've also been touched by that concept to move towards you. If you never light that candle, you all just walk right past each other, and never will the two meet. So I've learned that secret ideas are not great ideas. Shared ideas are opportunities to collaborate and win. So that's great advice. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
I appreciate that opportunity. Thank you.
And I look forward to getting a chance to get back together face to face so that we can dig in and figure out how I can become Farmer Brown.
Yes.
All righty. Well, you have a good rest of the day, and Gorillapreneurs, you're going to love this podcast. So please go online, go to wundergrubs.com, order up as many of these cookies as you can for the holidays, enjoy them, and help support this wonderful business and this wonderful mission. She's literally going to change the world, but she can't do it without your support.
Yes.
So go on and buy a cookie, and if you don't want to eat it, send it to me.
And we'll be donating some too. So that's definitely something we're going to start doing. When we talk about Gorillapreneur, just placing them for homeless people throughout the city.
Perfect.
Yep.
There you go.
Yep. So if you don't buy them, and I'll give them to somebody.
There you go. Put that positive karma out there.
Thank you. So glad you're here. Thank you for your podcast.
Okay. Thank you. You have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.